care about. WLBB, Carrollton, News Talk, 1330, FM 106.3.
Good morning. Welcome to the Community Voice. I'm Steve Gradick, your host, and it's a Thursday, so I don't even know how to behave because I'm only good for one day a week. Anyway, we're here. We're honored to have in studio Leslie McPherson. It's taken me several years to learn how to pronounce her name, but I have finally made it, and I'm very proud of that, actually. She's here in a couple of capacities, so it's going to be a little variety in the program today. We're all about variety. She was an attendee at the Faith and Freedom Coalition Conference called Road to Majority last week. I'm going to get her take on that. And then, of course, she is a Vill Rica City Council person, so we're going to dive into a couple of topics. I don't even know what they are that she wants to talk about regarding Vill Rica. So with that, good morning.
Good morning, Steve.
Okay, let's see. I think we're good on volume. Well, we're only days away, 20 some odd days away from Election Day. And Road to Majority, multi-day conference last week, all the big speakers, quote unquote, from national stage. What was your takeaway?
Well, it was definitely exciting. There were a lot of big name speakers, and that's great, but sometimes some of the most exciting speakers weren't necessarily the ones that would be the best known. But if I would just mention this and lay some foundation work for why does something like Road to Majority even exist? Why do, evangelical Christians feel the need to engage the culture politically and be involved? And so if you wouldn't mind, and aside, let me thank you for this too. My husband said, make sure they pronounce McPherson correctly, because there's no fear in McPherson, right?
No fear in McPherson. He's been on me for years. But
after being a Smith, I never had that problem, right? I never had to explain it. But so it was exciting going to this event, but let me just say this. Originally at the founding of our country, because we're talking about American evangelical Christians that go to this sort of thing. You think about Jamestown and the establishment of Jamestown. They were subjects of the king, right? I mean, they weren't Americans. They were British citizens. And the idea was that they would benefit the king.
If I can interject, on November 9th of this year will be the 400th anniversary of the landing at Plymouth Rock.
Yes. And Mike and I had a wonderful vacation planned. We were going to go to Plymouth, and then we were going to head over to Pennsylvania because it is the 400th anniversary. There was a special event there planned for days into the 4th of July. And of course, COVID hit and everything, and everybody's life got shut down. So it is a significant year. So that happened. And I'm going to go through this really quick. But when the Pilgrims came, who just accidentally happened to land a little further north, outside that control of the king,
right,
we had the beginning of setting the example of self-government.
Correct.
It wasn't, usually it was kings. What was the norm of the day was kings, slavery, that sort of thing. And so we had the example of self-government and them using their biblical concepts of how they would set that up. And so already they had, religious freedom was really important to them. The sanctity of human life, the fact that we even had individual liberty. So we're talking about, say, 1620, but let's fast forward to the First Great Awakening, say around 1731, 1755.
Yeah, George Whitefield.
Okay, so just prior to the Revolutionary War, the words that were spoken by our founding fathers were first spoken from the pulpits in the church. So when we start talking about people that believe in the Bible or Judeo-Christian values, it was from the beginning and the foundation of this country that occurred. And so they were spoken from the church. Okay, let's fast forward again. The Second Great Awakening, which gained momentum around the 1800s, and let's think the Civil War started, 1861? And so we started, and although they were abolitionists from the beginning, Benjamin Franklin, was a staunch abolitionist. So we see the setup gaining to the Civil War because we had that friction, right? Of still really a very young country, that friction from the beginning of the Declaration of Independence being set up, and in a sense, setting the groundwork for all men to be free. But we didn't do it yet, right? We were still wrestling with people who believed all men should be free and people in the country who benefited from some men not being free. So prior to the Civil War, you have the abolitionist movement. Who were most of the people that were, who made up most of the abolitionist movement? It was the churches. It was the Christians.
Right.
And so then we see the Christians, the church engaging the culture even then. So we fast forward another 100 years, approximately, after the Civil War, and think of Martin Luther King Jr. What did he draw on as the pillars of where he was coming from for the rights he was asking for?
Declaration.
He went back to the
Constitution.
Declaration of Independence, just like Frederick Douglass did,
Right.
and claimed that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator, not the government with those rights, but with the creator of those rights. So he drew from that, and then he drew from biblical principles for asking for those equal rights for Black Americans. And so he was looking to those promises. So that's why we as Christians, evangelical Christians, believe it's important. If we believe in the sanctity of life, if we believe there's people that are oppressed, that aren't getting the rights they deserve, poverty, poor people, the widow and orphan are talked about constantly in the Bible. It also talks about those that are, those that wait to ensnare others or don't give justice to those that aren't in the right position to get justice. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times that would be the example of the widow and orphan and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the groundwork for why we think it's important to engage the community and the culture.
Well, basically saying that the origins of the nation were found upon biblical principles by Puritans and Pilgrims who were fleeing religious persecution. And you mentioned Plymouth Rock, and of course they founded, when they came over on the Mayflower Compact. And all these were based upon such things like the Magna Carta, the English Book of Common Law, writings of John Locke. So it all intertwined and led to, but you mentioned, which is very important, the Great Awakening. We had the first with Jonathan Edwards, and then George Whitefield came in 1740s, thereabout, and he preached all over the country. So I would echo what you're saying, but emphasize what George did in bringing the nation together under his evangelistic preaching. So you're back to the evangelistic evangelical Christians, because it was really George that set the stage for us to be of one mind to go through.
See, you could have laid that foundation of what I just did, but I went through that really fast. About it. We're a very young country.
Well, beyond that, we're not, whatever country in history compares to this type of origin. And I don't know of any. I mean, yeah, you can go back to, Greek and Roman times. You can go back to other monarchies. But the uniqueness of self-government is just that. It's very unique. It's very fragile because of that, because you are depending upon we, the people.
And that's why even education is important to us, right? Whether our children get Christian values or our grandchildren, but also that there's a lot going on even now with the struggle for what's being taught in school regarding, our history, and that it's having a major impact on how people view the country and what that balance is. It's not about, just telling the good. It's telling both, but it's being truthful about it, and not emphasizing just the negative or just the good. And there's a lot of revisionist history. And so I just finished watching, a White House panel discussion. I don't know how many people do this sort of thing. But for me, I never imagined myself being involved politically the way I am. Now, I think it was just a matter of raising children, looking at what was going on, being somebody that cared about what was happening to our families, to our community, caring about what happened nationally and seeing how it affects all of us, and then just starting to engage in that matter. And the funny thing was, I was a student of public education. I had a decent understanding of our history. You always do the Revolutionary War about 50 times, and then you get very little of World War I, World War II, even though Vietnam occurred, before I was born, and then when I was just a very young child. They don't feel the need to cover that in school, so you really have to educate yourself. I took myself back to school, not literally to school. I self-educated myself in the last, say, 12 to 15 years and started studying, going to constitutional seminars and the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, reading the 5,000-Year Leap, numerous books and things like that. Now, I wish I had a better memory because I have to constantly go back and review facts like ones you were talking about.
Well, but the fact of the matter is, if you haven't been, really educated in a lot of this material, that it does take time. Yeah, and I like what you said about, your children. I mean, we tend to lose sight about what we do now determines their futures. And so it's not just us in 2020, it's them in 2030, 40, 50, 60, 70, and 80. So they're important decisions. Our guest this morning is Leslie McPherson. She attended the Faith and Freedom Coalition Conference last week called The Road to Majority, and she's also a Villa Rica City Council person. We are VR, and we're going to be back with more after this.
At Oak Mountain Academy, our daily schedule includes convocation, prayer, and the Pledge of Allegiance. By doing so, we build a family-like community where all students grow and flourish and personal faith is encouraged. Through community service and a historical approach to biblical study, our students are taught the value of the warrior way, honesty, respect, and responsibility. Oak Mountain Academy, we are a family creating legacies. To learn more, visit oakmountain.us.
For more than 70 years, you have turned to Tanner Health System for your healthcare needs. As our community moves forward, Tanner is here for you. Strong, safe, and close to home. Routine medical appointments, urgent elective surgeries, and imaging are back on the calendar at our hospitals and Tanner Medical Group practices. With the safety of our patients, staff, and community always our top priority. Learn more at tanner.org. #WeAreTannerStrong. That's tanner.org. #WeAreTannerStrong.
Good morning. Welcome back to the Community Voice. I'm Steve Gradick, your host. We're honored to have in studio Leslie McPherson. Shout out to Mike. Attendee of the Faith and Freedom Coalition Conference last week in Atlanta. And then we're going to talk just briefly a little bit more about that. And then we're going to delve into some issues or concerns she has with the Villa Rica City Council. You got to hear the Vice President last week.
We did. Mm-hmm.
I got to hear him last night, but not in person. So what was your impression?
Well, the interesting thing about any time you have somebody that needs high-level security, we made best friends while we were waiting in line with other people because you're in line so long waiting to get to security. And we've connected with them since. But that particular time was like a praise and prayer gathering, and that was just several hours on the Wednesday last week. And so Alveda King was there, Dr. Jack Graham. He originally was a pastor in my home state of South Florida, in my home county of Palm Beach County. He had been a pastor there and is now out in Dallas, Texas, and is well known there. Jensen Franklin would be somebody, Gainesville, Georgia. That would be someone from Georgia that was there, Bishop Harry Jackson, and a number of others. But the vice president was the keynote speaker. So that was a big deal. So once we got through security, he's always a solid speaker, and he has a strong Christian faith. Mm-hmm. So he fit right in. He's not an exciting speaker. I mean, I have to admit.
Be careful. He was a radio guy. He had a statewide radio talk show.
I know, but I think sometimes they get back into politics more and they get more sedate or something. I mean, he's a great statesman, but he's a solid speaker. But I'm telling you what, we had some fiery speakers. And I would say the most exciting day, and let me just say this before I go into who those speakers were. I have not seen, at least an event I've been at, such an ethnic and cultural mix in that group, which I found exhilarating. Originally being from South Florida and Palm Beach County specifically, my church was in Boca Raton, which was a very affluent area for a family that wasn't super affluent. But because of where I grew up with friends from Cuba, right? People died on our shores trying to get here because they want to be free. And even in the later years, as we had a large Haitian population, specifically in Delray Beach, we did, in the school system, people we knew at church. I had friends from Brazil, China, right? And so, and Hispanic friends all through high school and everything else. So to be at this conference, and because it was brought people from all over the country, to have a large Black population there, a large Hispanic population there, and not only there as attendees, but on the stage talking about everything from, it might have been immigration, but we had a former a former congresswoman from Mexico that dealt with the trafficking issue. And that's a passion of mine. If I weren't
from New Mexico.
Yeah. No, from Mexico.
Oh, okay. So she was
former congresswoman from Mexico.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
The country of Mexico.
Okay.
And with her was a woman who is a mother who was a victim of human trafficking. And so she not only spoke on the main stage, but they had breakout sessions was there. That was one of the best breakout sessions I attended. And so and let me just mention a few of the speakers that spoke on Thursday. When you talk about Leo Terrell is a Democrat, but he's identifying with a lot of the values we have. I would say we're conservatives. We're evangelical Christians, but because of what we believe, with being pro-life and, government, having the freedom of religion, everything else, Vernon Jones, so it's Vernon Jones, Bishop Wellington Boone, Clarence Henderson. I don't know if everyone knows that name, but Clarence Henderson was one of the lunch counter young men in Birmingham, Alabama at the Woolworth counter. Famous photo in the civil rights movement, and didn't know whether he was going to be brought up, out of that place, standing up or on a stretcher, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he's I think actually from Piedmont, Alabama, and
I wasn't sure specifically.
Yeah, he's from Piedmont. I read an article when I was over there a couple of weeks ago, and after that he wasn't able to move home. He was fearful for his life, so I think he's, like you said, living in Birmingham. But it's amazing he's still alive and he's still out there kicking.
Yeah, so between him and Kim Klacik, you might have seen her. She's well known for her videos, running for Congress up in Baltimore, wearing her red dress, walking through Baltimore, showing all the needs that haven't been met there, that have been ignored decade after decade. And so it was just really cool to have speakers like that. They were exciting. And on top of that, and this may seem a little controversial, but in a time where we have a lot of saying that we have to pick sides between caring about our Black community, neighbors and friends, and law enforcement, and that we can't do both. We can do both. And these speakers were the example that we can do both.
Mm-hmm. And capitalism does the most for minority communities and lifting people out of poverty than any other economic system.
Oh my gosh!
Has, yeah.
Yes, and I mean, I'm trying to think of the famous rock artist that was a great philanthropist. Right now I can't think, but did all these things, money all over the world, right, to other nations and everything, only to realize in the end, it is capitalism that has brought more people out of poverty than anything else we've done.
Our guest this morning is Leslie McPherson. We're going to take another break, come back, and delve into a couple of things of interest that she has from the great city of gold, Vill, Rica.
For more than 70 years, you have turned to Tanner Health System for your healthcare needs. As our community moves forward, Tanner is here for you. Strong, safe, and close to home. Routine medical appointments, urgent elective surgeries, and imaging are back on the calendar at our hospitals and Tanner Medical Group practices, with the safety of our patients, staff, and community always our top priority. Learn more at tanner.org. Hashtag We Are Tanner Strong. That's tanner.org. Hashtag We Are Tanner Strong.
At Oak Mountain Academy, our academic excellence shines through innovation and a personalized educational experience. Our pre-K 3 through 12th grade environment offers a family-oriented atmosphere. We are an independent school with faith-based values and an Academy Honor Code. Our academic standards prepare our students for college and beyond. I'm Patrick Duran, headmaster, inviting you to visit us on the mountain or at oakmountain.us. Come see how our warriors are creating legacies.
Good morning. Welcome back to Community Voice. I'm Steve Gradick, your host. We're having a good time here with Leslie McPherson. She's a attendee at Faith and Freedom Coalition. We kind of reviewed that. Road to Majority. She also serves on the City Council of the great state, the great city, rather. Someday there'll be a state, I'm sure. But right now they're a city. What's going on in Vill, Rica? How's the business climate? You know, where everybody's trying to get back on board and get back to normalcy, such that it is. How's everything going in Vill, Rica?
Well, you know, the last time I had time to walk the downtown and just talk to business owners, there were ones that were feeling real good, and there were other ones that were saying, we're struggling. Mm-hmm. You know, we're still really struggling. I spent a lot of the time during COVID, you know, besides listening to every virtual meeting and update and conference from the national level down to state level to the local health department, I was listening to the different city council meetings along with, you know, what we were doing and all. I was going for long walks downtown. We had a beautiful spring, thank goodness. So me and the dog were walking around downtown, sometimes by myself, stopping into the restaurants that were still open, the businesses that were still open, specifically the restaurants, and just checking on them, trying to promote them, trying to put them on Nextdoor and Facebook and say, people, please, if you've got the funds, you know, if you've got extra spending money, you know, maybe your money's still coming in, you're working remotely or whatever, get takeout from our restaurants. We had restaurants that were still trying to pay their, you know, their employees that weren't there. Mm-hmm. You know, and just stay alive during that time. It's been a rugged year. You know, everybody keeps saying, can we just push, restart, you know, a button to restart this? But you know what? I'm convinced, and I know I'm not the only one, I know you've seen it in your life too, are not the best lessons sometimes learned through the worst times in our life. And outside of all the bad stuff that occurred, there is a silver lining. We've made advances in technology. We've made advances in the medical field, right? Of figuring out how to treat this and probably learn some other things about how to treat some other things as a result. Because, right, sometimes we just find out by accident. Businesses learned how to innovate, try something different that in the future they're going to operate different because of what they learned during this pandemic. But it's still really rough because there's going to be businesses that will never come back. And I got to say this, thank you, God, that we have Governor Kemp. And I'm not saying that to be partisan, but you look at the states and you look at the governors that said things like, you can't even go fishing, or you can go fishing if it's a boat that doesn't have a motor, but if it has a motor, you can't go fishing. I mean, stuff like that was just insane, you know, or you can go outside, but for a limited time. You know, you can't just go for a walk or a bike ride. I mean, it's just insane.
What is it about human nature that causes government officials to overreach during a public health crisis?
I don't get it. I don't know. Power hungry because they can, because it hurt their people. Or you're so freaked out, you're living so much in fear that you can't think straight. And it's never a good idea to make decisions when you're making them out of fear. You've got to think, or out of emotion,
or
right?
Emotion. There
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you react out of emotion. You need to calm, cool down, look at the facts, and you got to balance it. When you only hear from one side, if you only look at the medical and you don't look at the other, because you know what? Here's the thing. A lot of times nobody was talking about, okay, lockdown, 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 because this will be safer. Okay, what'd you do to the people that you just cut off from all their emotional support? Older people, depression, suicide. I mean, all that needed to be taken into account. You now have people that have no place to go to work, that have addiction issues, have nothing to do. They have time on their hands. You know, it all has to be taken in. Everybody needs to have a seat at the table. The business community needs to have a seat at the table too. And you got to balance it. But because we're in Georgia, we're coming back stronger. And because Georgia's coming back stronger, we are here locally too, which benefits, you know, Carroll County as a whole, Vill, Rica specifically for us.
It's like a lot of things in adversity. It's just something you've got to push through. And unfortunately, we've got, as they say, got to develop that herd immunity. As difficult as that is to do, you know, we just got to work through this.
Yeah, and you know what, Vill, Rica, we really were probably, I think we were the first city that was out having in-person meetings. You know, we had safety protocols. We followed the CDC recommendations, but I was really proud of the fact that we were there, because I'll tell you what, Zoom meetings, I mean, I'm glad we can have them, but they got their downside. Mm-hmm. You know, trying to understand what's going on with the other people in the meeting and interruptions and everything else. And we were doing our budget. In the middle of all this, we just adopted our budget, so that all had to be done in the middle of COVID.
As we kind of run out of time, any particular other concern, issue in Vill, Rica you'd like to address?
Well, you know, I'm a fiscal hawk. You know, I want to take care of our community. I don't want to be a tightwad that you don't fix your infrastructure and all that. Anybody that, you know, follows what we do in the city of Vill, Rica, or me specifically as a city councilwoman, I am very much about let's spend the money to fix the things we need to do. And but at the same time, I've got my issues with spending money on things we may not need to. If I just wanted to throw out one that I will continue to harp on, it will be, and I'll just throw out this one. I have a real big issue with the fact that we reimburse tuition payments for you know, college classes, you know, which people working toward their degrees and that sort of thing for city employees. And yet at the same time, I was all on board with us doing the salary study that we did to get our salaries where they needed to be. It was downright embarrassing what we were paying some of our people on the lower level. And so we have good benefits. I want our employees, I want it to be a good place for people to work. I want our salaries to be competitive. And it's especially important with first responders, right? Because it's very expensive to train police officers, that sort of thing. When you lose them, it's expensive for you to lose them. And so we addressed that first of all in Vill, Rica, but then we went ahead and did the study to look at everybody and exactly what their job description was and what they do, and getting everybody up to par and addressing that. We're finishing that in this budget, but I do take issue with some additional things that we do, because we already spend over $150 some odd thousand on training, certification, and things that are specific to the job across all departments in the city. And I have constituents that are paying off student loans who can't afford for their kids to go to school. I have a neighbor who brought their child home from North Georgia because they couldn't afford to keep them up there. And yet you're asking taxpayers to pay for somebody else's college education. I don't get it, and I don't think most taxpayers would be comfortable with it.
Our guest this morning has been Leslie McPherson. She's a Vill, Rica. I keep on saying that. Vill, Rica City Council person. And she attendee of the Faith and Freedom Coalition last week. And we thank you for coming in. Very interesting. It's always good.
Thank you, Steve.
It's always good to catch up with you. And we give our best to your husband Mike. He's always been out there on the front lines too. So,
and the City of Gold.
And the City of Gold. All right, and thank you for listening. We thank our sponsors, Tanner Health System, Oak Mountain Academy. Go out and make it a great day. You're in tune to WLBB Carrollton.